As tensions escalate over Ukraine, many countries have been seeking solutions through diplomatic efforts. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to meet Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov next week. The U.S. State Department confirmed the meeting on Thursday. Meanwhile, the office of Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau says U.S. President Joe Biden will host a call on Friday to discuss Ukraine with NATO and other Western leaders. Ukraine is also expected to top the agenda at the Munich Security Conference, which opens on Friday. Russia has expelled senior U.S. diplomat Bart Gorman from Moscow. The Russian Foreign Ministry says the move is in response to an earlier expulsion of a Russian diplomat from Washington. Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says accusations of Russia's military buildup at its border with Ukraine are baseless. Moscow has announced 2 separate pullbacks. The Kremlin also criticized Western officials for commenting on its domestic military drills. CGTN's Julia Chapman has more from Moscow.
John Sullivan, the U.S. ambassador to Russia, was summoned to the foreign ministry where he was handed the Russian response to the U.S. and NATO response to Russia's security demands. And this text has been published by Russian state news agencies as well. The foreign ministry website has crashed, so we haven't been able to get it direct from the source. But according to TASS, it was a pretty confrontational statement put forward from the Russian side. It said that the U.S. was ignoring Russia's red lines. It said that the U.S. didn't give a constructive response to Russia's security demands. It also worryingly said that in the absence of the readiness of the U.S. side to agree on firm, binding guarantees, Russia will be forced to respond, including through measures of a military technical nature. In the next line, however, it went on to say that Russia does not intend to invade Ukraine, but it also appeared to make even further demands than the previous ones put forward by Moscow, calling on Ukraine to give back all of the defensive weapons provided to it by the West, for all Western technical and military advisors to be withdrawn from Kiev.
At a meeting of the UN Security Council on Thursday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned that Russia would seek to invade Ukraine in the coming days. He also said Moscow was planning to manufacture a pretext for the attacks.
We don't know exactly the form it will take. It could be a fabricated so-called terrorist bombing inside Russia, the invented discovery of a mass grave, a staged drone strike against civilians, or a fake, even a real attack using chemical weapons.
However, Blinken did not present any concrete evidence to support his warning of a Russian invasion. A Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergey, who spoke before Blinken, warned others about making the UN meeting into a circus. He also pointed out the U.S. accusations are baseless. The meeting was held amid tensions between Russia and the West after the U.S. accused Moscow of deploying troops near Ukraine in recent weeks. Shelling incidents were reported on Thursday between separatists and Ukrainian forces in the Donbass region. Correspondent Oleg Litvinchuk visited the city of Donetsk in Donbass to hear from some residents.
Many publications on the internet that Russia wants to invade Ukraine. And we in the heart of Donetsk city to find out.
Intensive traffic on the roads, people walking the sidewalks, working cafes and shops. Someone is walking with their children in a park. Someone is in a hurry about their business. It's more like a peaceful life than a prepare for war. We ask people what's going on in the city.
In general, people are working as normal. As you can see, they are walking around with their children, going about their business, going to work. The situation is quite calm. Of course, there is a situation. But it's not about the fact that Russia is going to attack someone. It's about Ukraine. Ukraine has gathered troops on the demarcation line on us in Donbass.
People walk quietly, go to stores, cafes, the theater. Everyone is fine. No one believes it anymore. I think it is an information war, just trying to intimidate the people. But we cannot be intimidated.
Today we walked around the city and talked with the citizens. There is no panic. City lives an usual life. People shopping, going around the city, and no one's prepared to fight against Ukraine.
I want to get you more analysis on this tense situation there. I'm now joined by Cui Hongjian in Beijing. He's the director of the Department of European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies. Mr. Cui, welcome to Global Watch today. Now, Russia said it has pulled back more troops from the border with Ukraine, but the U.S. insists Moscow is still building up forces. So who is giving out misinformation here, and to what end?
Now there is a kind of a stranger situation surrounding this Ukraine issue, or a kind of a competition between the United States and Russia. Indeed, I think now we are witnessing a new type of information warfare. It's different from the, as we know, information warfare in narrow sense. It's not only to destroy and attack the information system of rivals, and now it's aimed at destroy the visibility or credibility of rivals, and to win some moral and also legitimacy in terms of international norm and law. So we can find that at this moment, United States tried to exaggerate the threat from Russia, from so-called invasion of Russia into Ukraine. And I think the purpose for United States is trying to firstly reduce the cost of the, confront with Russia, and then to get some more so-called solidarity with its allies in Europe. Because as we know, indeed, Americans don't want to have a real investment to help Europe to keep so-called security. So I think that's the reason why United States still try to take use of the information warfare to deal with this issue from Ukraine.
Mr. Cui, at the UN security meeting, the U.S. actually gave a list of possible scenarios for a pretext for an attack, including a fabricated so-called terrorist bombing inside Russia and the invented discovery of a mass grave. One would assume that the U.S. was able to put together this list through its own intelligence, but Washington did not provide actual evidence for the allegations. What do you make of the U.S. coming up with such a specific list of scenarios? Is it part of that threat exaggeration you were talking about?
Still, I think that the United States is trying to continue this information warfare, and also on the basis of a so-called two-track strategy towards Russia. On one hand is military and also information warfare. On the other hand is democratic efforts. So I think now there is some scenarios from the United States about Russia's invasion, but at the same time, no any evidence. I think it's a very, very typical. The information warfare. Another issue I think for United States is still, as we know, after the first stage of the Ukraine crisis, now there is a break for the tension. So I think it's a very, very important time for United States to estimate the result or even achievement for the first stage, and try to find out more common ground with its European allies, because otherwise, as we know, there will be some maybe more difference between American and European allies. So it should be stopped from American winning, and to try to get some more solidarity with the European side to be against with Russia.
Let's revisit the core issue here among the tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Russia's security demands for no eastward expansion of NATO and that Ukraine be banned from the alliance. These security demands have been rejected outright by the U.S. How reasonable are Russia's demands and security concerns?
if we take the angle of the Russia, I think it's understandable and reasonable for Russia to take care about its strategic or security environment. As we know, since the end of the Cold War, indeed, the NATO's expansion to a large degree to have some more, unsafety from Russia. So to deal with a more and more hostile environment will be very, very top priority for Russia, for its sovereignty, for its integrity of territory, anything. So I think that it's reasonable for Russia. But now I think the more critical question is how could Russia and the Western countries to try to have some more mutual trust. As we know, yes, there are a lot of change since the end of Cold War. So how could both two sides to construct a more maybe confidence building process? I think that will be very, very critical. Once there are more mutual trust, I think the expansion of NATO will not be the top priority or top concern for Russia.
Now let's talk about those diplomatic efforts that are continuing with major input from European countries like Germany and France, who wish to take control of Europe's security matters into their own hands. And Russia's announcement of the military pullback came during exchanges between Russia and Germany. How much can those efforts change the course of the current situation?
For this Ukraine crisis and also even larger, concern from Russia, from all of the European countries about the possible European security system, I think it's important for democratic efforts to play a more and more, constructive role. As we know now, the problem is they need the diplomatic efforts, but still less space, especially when the United States try to have this two-track strategy towards Russia by deterrence and also diplomatic efforts. So I think that after this short break, perhaps European side should have some more diplomatic efforts in name of Normandy system and also Minsk agreement. Once something happens in this way, I believe that there will be more hope for Russia, for Ukraine, and for most of the European countries to have a more stable situation, and then to give some more space for further political and also diplomatic solution, not only for this issue in the eastern part of Ukraine, and also for the long-term and sustainable, construction of security between Europe and Russia.
Mr. Cui, we appreciate your analysis. Thank you so much for making time for us today.